Okay, so here I'm going to go through the process from beginning to end for a problem that requires decision statements. So the problem is this: calculate and display a salesperson's weekly pay. The user will enter the type of employee, either P for part-time or F for full-time, and the amount of sales for the week. If the employee is part-time, their base pay is $100 plus commission. If they're full-time, it's $300 plus commission, and commission is based on the following information. So I want to start off declaring variables. I know I need to, store the employee type, and I know it's got to be a char because it's going to be holding a P or an F. And then I have a lot of things I need to keep track of. Let's see, the weekly sales, okay, which I have here. The base pay, either 100 or 300. The commission rate, right, that's determined here. I'm going to actually calculate a commission and then the weekly pay. Now, you might not always have all these variables. Initially, you might have to come down here and start your algorithm and say, hey, I can use a variable for that, and then go back up here and add one. Also, in the template, there's declare variables / constants. I'm not going to use any constants here, so I can just take that out. And there is also initialize variables. I don't have any variables initialized, so I took that out as well. All right, so let's talk about the algorithm. I'm going to get two things from the user, right? The employee type and the weekly sales, right? These are just names that I'm giving these items here. Type of employee and the amount of sales. Calculations. Now, this is going to require decision statements, right? You need to think, you need to calculate the base pay, and then you need to calculate the commission, and then you need to add the two together. So if the employee type is P, my base pay is 100, else it's 300. Two choices. You want to show the if-else structure. Doesn't have to be C++, right? Just the idea of the if-else. Here, if the weekly sales is less than 1,000, the commission rate's 0.02, right? That's 2%. If it's less than or equal to 2,000, it's 0.03, else it's 0.04. So there's an if-else if statement here, right? Because I have three choices. Then my commission is just going to be, right, my weekly sales times my commission rate, that was determined here, and the weekly pay will just be the base pay plus the commission. And the results I'm going to display are just going to be the weekly pay. That's it. That's all that's asked for in this case. So you'll see here you do want to show an if-else structure or an if-else if or a switch. Whatever you want to use, it doesn't have to be C++, just kind of noting what calculations you're going to do and actually showing the if statements. And lastly is our test data. Okay. Now, I have a lot of test data here. If the employee type is P and the weekly sales is 500, then the pay is going to be 100 for part-time, and then this is just 500 times 0.02. Right? I want to check everything. If it's P and it's 1,500, it's going to be the 100 base times the 1,500 times 0.02, right? That's 145. And lastly, if it's P and 2,500, I want to have test data for that, because these are all different scenarios that could happen, right? If it's P, then it could be less than 1,000. It can be P less than or equal to 2,000. It could be P. It could be greater than 2,000. And then all the same options with F, right? If it's F, and again, I just picked, you want to do some with P, you want to do some with F. I picked a number in each of the three ranges, and I've got all this math figured out. Okay, so this is what we need, and next we're going to take a look at the actual program. Okay, so you've already determined what variables you need and what their data type is going to be, so that goes right into your main program. I'm going to prompt the user for the employee type and the weekly sales. I'm going to get those two pieces of information. Here you'll see enter the employee type. So you want to put P for part-time or F for full-time. If you don't put this out there, right, the user has no idea what to enter. So you want to give them some information. I'm going to use a CN statement. This is just one character variable. And then enter the weekly sales amount and CN sales amount. We're just working with characters and doubles here, so it's just the input operator. There's no get line. All right, next we want to determine if it's part-time or full-time so we can figure out what the base pay is. And here you'll see if the employee type equal P, and I added a second part to this, if the employee type is equal to lowercase p. So this will work for uppercase or lowercase no matter what the user enters. Then my base pay is 100, else it's 300. Okay, now I want to calculate my commission rate. So if the weekly sales is less than or equal to 1,000, here's my commission rate. Less than or equal to 2,000, it's 0.03, else it's 0.04. I want you to keep in mind that when you're working with if, else, if statements, if you don't use curly braces, the body of that if, right, is going to be the next one statement. So you can always do this if you wanted to clarify. You know, and sometimes people like to do that because it makes it a little clearer for them to read. And either way is acceptable. Okay, I'm going to calculate my commission now, which is going to be the weekly sales times the commission rate. And then my weekly pay is going to be the base pay, right, from up above, plus the commission. And then I'm just going to display the weekly pay. And now I want to run it, and when I run it, I'm going to check it with my test data. Right, P and 500 gives me the weekly pay of $110, okay? And P and 500 gives me $110. You know, you can try all of these out. Let me just try, I'll just try one more. F and 1500 should give me 345. And there's 345. Okay, I could get two places after the decimal point if I wanted. You know, in my weekly pay, I was mostly concerned with, you know, just showing you the if-else structure, but I could say fixed, and I can set my precision to 2. And then, of course, I have to come up here and include IOmanip. All right, and now when I run it, and I'll use even different test data, so I'll put P and 2500, and that is my test data, and it did come out to 200 as it should. So one step at a time, thinking about the if statements, thinking about what variables you can use. There would be other ways to write this program if you wanted to. You know, I could just maybe, you know, nest some of these if structures together. In here, I could have just calculated the commission, right, which would just be the weekly sales times 0.02. You know, I wouldn't have to introduce a new variable for that. You know, so there's a lot of ways you can do it that's correct. It just kind of comes up to your thought process. All right, so there's our sample program with decision statements.